2, 1.
Good morning. It is Monday, April 29th, and this is the Education and Culture Committee. I'm Chair, Councilmember Will Jawando. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmembers Alvarez and Mink. And this is our third work session today on the FY25 operating budget for Montgomery County Public Schools. As a reminder, our first session, we reviewed the overall budget, financial reports, and the fund balance. We also discussed several school funding related issues. The second session, we focused on MCPS's accelerators and the ESSER funded items that need shift to the operating budget, international enrollment, as well as dual enrollment. Today, for our third session, we'll be focusing on staffing, vacancies, contractual services, special education, compensation, and benefits. So just a few things, just a couple items. We will also take action, preliminary action, on the Supplemental Appropriation 2484, which for educational support professionals, and send that to the full council. And as a reminder, on May 1st, on Wednesday, we'll have our final work session on the MCPS operating budget, and we'll make a funding recommendation to the full council at that time. So want to invite up our partners from MCPS, Mr. Hall, Mr. Riley. I know we have OMB is here as well, and whoever else MCPS.
The employee association.
Yes, the employee associations, of course. And I know it's a little warm, but
Such as that seventh school.
we are at the top of the building. But I believe the AC is working, so we're going to find out today. Jennifer Martin, Pia Morrison, Sally Murrick, Christine Handy. Good to see everybody. Thank you for joining us. So as far as just order, we'll start, I think MCPS has a short presentation to just kind of overview of the budget as it relates to the items that we're going to discuss today. And then we'll hear from each of our association presidents. And then we will go through the staff packet. Thank you again for that, Ms. McGuire. And then we'll stop probably in each section, ask questions. If you have something you want to say on a section, once we get to the staff, let me know and I'll come to you. And then colleagues obviously will chime in throughout. Colleagues, anything else? All right, let's dive in. We're excited to do it. Mr. Ho?
Great. Thank you, Chair Jawando, members of the Education and Culture Committee. My name is Brian Hall. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Montgomery County Public Schools. First, I just wanted to start by expressing my appreciation to this committee and to the full council for your continued and ongoing support as we work through this budget process and many of the other challenges facing the school system and public education around the country today. And I specifically appreciate the committee devoting additional time and resources this year to, better understanding in more depth the MCPS budget, which is large and extremely complicated. And I hope that our efforts to be more transparent and accountable, have been recognized by the committee and have provided you all with the information you need to feel comfortable making a solid recommendation for the MCPS funding levels for next school year. We've been working on this budget since July, so this is not something that comes together quickly. Basically, as soon as we finish this one, we'll start on next year's budget. And we, from the very beginning of this, and we've discussed this with our board and with the committee, has been a very fiscally responsible ask. We know that the county does not have the resources, the revenues that it needs to do everything that is needed in the county right now. And so for our part, we tried very hard to put forth a fiscally responsible budget with limited new programs. I think last year we came to the committee with about $46 million in new programming. This year, excluding blueprint requirements, that number is closer to $4 million of things that we feel are absolutely necessary. So the budget ask really is made up of inflationary costs and increases, salaries and benefits, and that makes up the vast majority of the school system's ask this year. We do know that this is the end of the ESSER funding, something that we've known was coming for about 4 years now. We've got $120 million of the federal funds budgeted this year that will not be there next year. Our ask is to bring about $30 million of that back, the resources that we feel are most vital to supporting our students. I think, as we all know, our children continue to deal with the recovery from COVID, whether that's academically, social, emotionally. Certainly the pandemic has changed the lives of our young people like nothing that I certainly have seen in my lifetime. And then you add on top of it social media, the internet, and just the much more complicated world they live in than the one that you and I grew up in. There's also been a significant increase in special education needs and students needing additional services to meet those unique needs. We're seeing behavior issues, violence, drugs, and weapons in our schools that we've never seen before. And again, this is not a Montgomery County issue. It's across the state of Maryland and across the country. And so as we move forward, making sure that we do have the supports in place, even after the expiration of the federal funds, is going to be absolutely imperative to providing the supports that our young people need. Based on the county executive's recommendation, there is a significant gap between what the board has recommended and has approved and what the county executive recommended. It's about a $56 million gap. Last year we faced a similar gap, but we had some tools in our pocket that we don't have this year. We were able to utilize the $25 million in fund balance. At the end of the process, we moved about $30 million of expenses from the operating budget over to ESSER. So right there, that's about $55 million of resources that we were able to use last year that we won't have access to this year. And so reductions will be real reductions that will come in the form of FTEs and services to children. So, we're here to work with the committee and ask the council to continue providing these necessary resources, at least for another year, as we continue the recovery and continue to move forward. And so I will turn it over to Mr. Riley to walk through some of the slides here.
Good morning.
Just before you do that, thank you for that overview. I just wanted to mention, have we formally received the memos? Not yet, okay. Well, I know you'll go over some of the items there within related to special education and potential where the cuts, you just alluded to some of these things in your opening.
Yep.
But when we get to those sections, I'll ask you to elaborate. I know, and then for the public's view, we will certainly, nothing's being hidden here. I don't think they've been formally transmitted. There are memos related to special education and just what, if you didn't receive the funding level that you requested, or if the gap wasn't closed, what some of those cuts might have to be, just so that's understood. So absolutely. I'll ask that you speak to that when we get to those points. Yes, Councilmember Ming.
Thanks. I just wanted to, real quickly before we jump in, to just note for the public also that what we just heard from Mr. Hull was known last year also. This was a difficult conversation that we had last year, and there were questions before before all of us, about whether we were going to, increase the tax more, look at more revenue options at that time. But there was an awareness of, we were working to balance, obviously, the pressures on people's pocketbooks at home, as well, of course, everything else that we need to fund across the government. But we were certainly aware, as part of that, that you were making decisions between things like increasing class size or renegotiating the union contracts, which we all at the council, that was an absolute non-starter, because we need to fund our people first, or there's really nowhere to go from there. So we were aware that in order to avoid those, that you basically chose to put off that conversation for another year by using those one-time ESSER funds, knowing at the time that we were going to be basically in the same situation this year. So I just want to make sure it's very clear to the public that it's not like something irresponsible or unexpected happened over this last year, that we knew that there was this shortfall and this gap, and that rather than increasing class sizes at that moment last year, that the choice was to use one-time funds and see if there's a solution that we could come to over the course of this next year, knowing that this hard conversation is going to have to come at some point. So just wanted to add that context as well.
Appreciate it. Mr. Riley.
Good morning. So I brought the big book with me. No intention to go through every page, but just to give put it in context. So we were talking last work session about a line item budget. So those line items are actually in here. It's a little cumbersome to get to it. We are working with our OSI partners at MCPS to do a budget dashboard. So there'll be drill downs, things like that, to make it a little easier. But I do, next slide, please. I do want to kind of go over, put some context into where we got these numbers, where the gap is. So we develop our budget based on different buckets, and we call it our same service budget. The first step is we put the budget to our departments and divisions. They're the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are going to see what's going on, specifically related to things like inflation and rate change. So you'll see here in this budget, the summary of changes, we have $15.5 million specifically allocated for inflation and rate change and realignments. These are things that either it's projected by the chiefs and the associates in the different divisions and departments, or it's invoices that we already have. It's contracts that we know what those prices are going to be. And we've seen significant increases over this year as well as what we're seeing for next year. So some of them are utilities, fuel for our buses, costs for our special education students placed in non-public schools. That's just some examples there. The next bucket that we address when we create our same service budget is enrollment changes. So as you know, during COVID, our general enrollment actually went down 2 years in a row. Last year it went up. This year it went slightly down again. It's pretty much steady. But when we look at our non-general education, our special ed, our emerging multilingual language learners, we're seeing significant increases there. So normally what you would see if we had a decrease in enrollment, you would see this as a decrease in our funding there. But because of the offsetting increases in special ed and EMLs, you're seeing a 0.8, pretty much flat, but a $0.8 million increase there on that line. The next line that we address when we do our same service budget is additional school space and new classrooms. So we're adding a fifth grade to Cabin Branch Elementary School, so that accounts for some of that increase, as well as additional space within schools across the county. So that's that $3.2 million. Next line that you see there is our grant and enterprise funds. These we put up here because we need the appropriation approved for this increase. But for grants and enterprise, there's an offsetting revenue account for, and that's the definition of enterprise funds, is that they are self-supporting. Grants as well, too. We'll have grant expenses, but they're supported by grant income. So we put that up there, but we're not showing you the revenue here, but there'd be offsetting revenue to account for that. Next item, continuing salaries and benefits, including health care. So this is the one.
Riley, just hold on. There's a lot here, so I think just one question here.
Sure.
Clarifying question on the grants line, that the amount shown there, there's offsetting revenue, but the amount shown here in the 12.2, that's the net, or is that before the offsetting revenue?
That's
Fully
the
offset.
gross. So
That's not tax supported.
Okay.
Those are not tax supported dollars. This chart does include all of the changes, including both the tax supported, which is how we talk about sort of certainly the county funds, but also some of the state aid. That line is specifically funds that have changes and impact the school system's operations, but are not in that
But
tax
none of that
supported
is-
budget.
okay.
No.
Thank you.
And a number of these lines do include both.
Got it. Okay.
But it adds to our total requested of the $187 million. That's why we put it on here to make the math work. So
Got it. Thank you. And one more clarifying question in the enrollment changes. I just want to make sure that I caught that right, that the enrollment is, goes up and down, it tweaks, so it's down slightly overall, but because special ed is up so much, that's why the amount is increased.
special ed and our EML.
EML, yes.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So there's actually a net increase of 35 FTEs related to that offset. So next line there is continuing salaries and benefits, including healthcare. So in this bucket, this represents the second year of our 2-year agreements with our associations. So a portion of that is that $119 million, specifically $79 million. In addition to that, we included benefits there. The other component of that is $40 million for our EBP fund, which we talked about that at the beginning in our first session, the situation that we have there. We feel at this point we're going to need continued increases in that fund over the next 2 or 3 years due to increases in costs as well as increases in utilization. So that's continuing salaries and benefits. The next line is the ESSER, or Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. These were the funds that Mr. Hull mentioned at the beginning. At the end of last year's budget process, we did move stuff specifically to ESSER, knowing that there'd be a need for it to come back. These are things such as social workers, psychologists, RJ specialists, and these are things that are, we've seen improvements and, everything that we do when we create this budget, we're looking at what works. So these are things that we believed work with the use of ESSER funds, and this represents what we're bringing back to our operating fund. The next line there, we kind of bucketed its accelerators, including Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So at the last session, we went through the accelerators. We got a couple of things in that line. That is the $4.6 million in accelerators outside of Blueprint. It's $8.2 million for Blueprint. And then there's another piece. There's $4.9 million for concentration of poverty or community schools funding there. What that is, that was additional money that we received from the state, specifically pegged for concentration of poverty. What happened was we had a certain amount of money in the budget, but not as much as they had in there for this specific purpose. So it's basically kind of restricted for that purpose, and that's why that's added there. To that line. And then finally, efficiency reductions, as Mr. Hull mentioned here too. Part of our budget development process is we task our folks not only with looking at what's working and what can be approved, but what isn't working. So that's always part of the discussion as well too. Just to give you a little background too, we did multiple community forums too. That was the theme of our community forums this year. What in the base budget, what in this 500-page book is working, what can be improved, which we call our accelerators, what's something that we can put new money in to improve student outcomes, and then finally, what's something that might not be working as well as we want it to. It's a little bit difficult conversation when we're talking about return on investment. We're talking the business world. You can do a return on investment. Your main concern is the bottom line. What's that shareholder? What's the bottom line for shareholders? Here, we're dealing with 160,000 shareholders. We're dealing with 210 schools. We're dealing with 25,000 employees. So, when we look at reductions, not everything is clear cut like, hey, that doesn't work, because it might work for a subset of certain parts of the population. So just to give you a background on reductions, but that represents two phases of reductions. We did a 3% reduction and then a 5% reduction for central office folks, and that's what that represents, that 14 million. So the total 187, county executive recommendation 132, and as Mr. Hull mentioned, 55.7 is that gap not addressing the special ed.
Yeah, appreciate that. Just a question, clarifying question. On the ESSER, so we've got the amount that was on ESSER last year was 120, is that right? 120 million?
That's what was in the FY24 budget.
Yeah, last year.
ESSER 3 was 252, but in this current year, it's 120.
Right, this year. So the reduction, that's what I'm just trying to understand the reduction. So you all went through that list of things that were funded at 120 million, cut it down to 33.1 million of things that you thought that transferred over, that were being funded by ESSER, that you're maintaining. Correct, okay. And that list, like all of these could have you have the big book there. All of these could have a sub-list, obviously, and many of them do. That list of things that we've seen before is the social, which we went over in the last session, social workers, those items. And that's in the previous packet for folks who are wondering. The 14.1 in efficiency reductions, that you said that breaks out to, could you just go through that again, what that breaks out to?
Yeah, so these are reductions that were, when we go through our budget development process, from the outset, we asked our chiefs and associates.
Some of this is across the board cuts that happened.
Across the board with schools, or what we call our Chapter 1 excluded. But yeah, across the board based on percentage. At a certain point, when we were looking at projected revenues, we saw that there might be an issue with getting to where we want to be with the needs. So we asked for an additional 5% cut. So that represents 8% cut of the 14.1.
A sense of what that means, like what is that cut? Because we're talking about it very.
Yeah, so I mean, so
what does that mean for?
So I oversee Office of Finance, roughly. Well, I guess I'm talking finance, but there's 100 folks in my division. Now we're down to 92. Like it's all people.
Department of Finance went from 100 people to 92. So it's
Yeah.
people, because you're 86% people, so most of this is people.
Right, and then if you look at all the different chapters, it's going to be similar situations there. For me, for finance, what that means is it's not a total loss of services, but we might be paying our vendors a little slower. We're not going to pay our people a little slower, but
No, don't do that.
no. But some of the slowdown in services, I would say, that happens when you do have reductions within central office.
And then obviously we'll talk about special ed in a minute, but did you have a question? Yeah. Chime in.
The efficiency reductions, those percentage, the 5% and 3%, those were cuts that were made across all departments, right?
Across all like if you go in here, across all chapters other than chapter 1, which is schools.
And then there were a few departments that were held harmless. We took very little from transportation. We didn't take anything from safety and security. And we didn't take anything from special education from the base budget.
Okay. My understanding was that there were cuts within special ed, but maybe that falls into a different bucket. But I just want to make sure that we fully understand that as well. Because fully respecting that you all had to make difficult decisions that you would rather not make, but I want to make sure that the public fully understands the impact of the, financial decisions that.
So I can address the special ed piece now, if that's all right. So again, based on the growing enrollment and the needs of the students, the department projected a need for $14 million additional dollars just to maintain the services that they're currently providing with the additional enrollment. They received a $9 million increase, so a $5 million shortfall between what they projected they need to maintain services and then what was finally included in the board's adopted budget.
You're talking about from FY '23 to '24? Or
24 to
from 24 to 25? Okay.
Maybe I didn't make that clear. So when we were talking about developing the budget, the first step is getting with the different chapters and the different chiefs. So the first step in that is actually, what is your full ask? What do you think would be help meet the student needs, right? Before that happens, before it gets to the superintendent's budget, we do look at that and see what is reasonable. And then so it's not listed as part of that reduction because it kind of happened before it got to the superintendent's budget, if that makes sense. So there's multiple steps in addition to once we get the superintendents, then it goes to boards tentatively adopted and then the final. So there's multiple phases. I could have made that clearer that, in that initial where we're meeting with the folks and looking at realignments, looking at what's working, what's not, we're also looking at, what is a reasonable amount for accelerators.
Well, I'll just note then, especially in some of these key categories, that I would be interested in knowing even some of those cuts that happened at those earlier stage, I think is worth talking about here, even if we don't have the funds to address them, just to make sure that we are being, again, very transparent with the public. And if they want us to look for and find ways to fill those gaps in the coming years, we need to make sure that they understand what's happening now. So that one in particular, I know that there's a lot of understandable concern from the special ed community about, both families and staff, about shortcomings in those areas. And it's really, really critical that we find a way to address those. So appreciate you highlighting that. And, we talk about in all of our committees across all of our county departments, what is a same services budget? What are same services budget lines? And then what should really go on kind of that, what are we calling again, new and enhanced list, the reconciliation list. And so, to provide that context here, it sounds like there are additional funds that really would have just been a same services budget line that didn't even make it, even in some of these key areas like special ed, ultimately to the budget request. And so what we're looking at in front of us is a reduction beyond that. So I just want to make sure, again, especially in some of those key areas where we're really hearing a lot from the community, that we're talking about those shortfalls as well.
Yeah, and just since we're here on special ed, let's just do the special ed part now. Can we do that? Sure. Yeah, just since we're here, I'd like to then we can tie it up.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Let's just discuss it, and then we'll go back to your slides after that, okay? So.
So then can I just jump in and provide a little bit of the
Please.
context of what's?
Please.
So beginning on page 5 of your packet, again, certainly knowing that this is an area that the committee wanted to dive into more deeply this year, what the packet does in this section is really just to try to present those base budget elements of the structure and position, staffing, and budget of the special education services and programs. Now, I will say that the numbers here are the ones from the superintendent's budget, because as Mr. Riley is pointing out, that's the one that has the most granular detail. Some of the specific numbers may change through the process, but I think this still gives you a sense, certainly, of, again, the overall structure and composition of the special education budget. So what you see on the bottom of page 5 and the top of page 6 of your packet, again, is a breakout of the FY24 to 25 change. Overall, the recommendation for special education services, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to take one more moment. This represents the school-based services. So these are the services that are delivered in schools is the summary we're talking about now. There are many other elements, of course, to special education, but that's the focus of this portion of your packet. There is an increase of $20.3 million over the FY24 approved level. Within the programs and services that are identified here, the largest section and the largest change in positions is the addition of 63 FTE to the homeschool model of services. Certainly, I know we have folks that will speak more specifically to that here. I do just want to say homeschool does not refer to the child's home. It refers to the homeschool of assignment. And my understanding is that certainly does reflect the system's effort to increase inclusion in schools to the maximum extent possible. Certainly, special education is an area where we see a high rate of vacancies. In the category 6 as a whole, there are 280 vacancies and about 5.9% of approved positions. Now, again, the budget category for special education includes the central office positions as well, and not just school-based. When we look at the breakout of special education specialists, there are 54 vacancies, and that's 9.6% of approved positions. There are other position types that have special education within them, such as teachers and other positions. However, I do not have the level of detail to break that out. Just to round out the summary of information here, certainly, again, when we see those vacancies, an important tool for special education is the use of contractual services, because the underlying principle of special education is that the services that are identified in a child's individual IEP, education, thank you, must be provided. And so MCPS did provide the breakdown of FY24 costs in contractual services for special education, and that is on page 6 and the top of page 7 of your packet. The total FY24 projection for contractual services for special education is $6.6 million. So again, that is the general outline of the school-based programs for special education services.
Thank you. And then just, if you're watching, I always say the millions watching home, if you're watching that, you heard Mr. Hull say 14 million, and then you heard 20 million. Can you round that, help the layperson understand what the difference between those two numbers? But no, actually, you heard three numbers. You heard 20 million in increase in the packet, which is correct. You'll explain that. The 14 million was what the Special Education Office requested to maintain the level of service for folks within who have special ed, because the numbers have gone up. You can also speak to that. And then what they got was 9 million over last year, which is where we're getting this $5 million gap within, which is what we're talking about right now. So could you just explain those phenomena? Whoever wants to explain it.
Yeah, I think you did a good explanation.
Thank you.
So
It would be helpful maybe to know where, because again, the 20 million represents increases in some programs and decreases in others. My assumption is that the 14 and the 9 refer to some specific program, and I don't have that information.
So if you look at the top of page 6
Of the packet.
there is special ed and pre-K, and so we included when we broke ours numbers out, we included the PEP program with our pre-K. Here they're included with the special ed, so that's the difference from the 20 million to the 14 million. The difference between the 7.6 here and
Just explain, just say that again.
sorry, that is pre-K for third and fourth graders receiving special education.
3 and
services.
4.
3 and 4-year-olds.
3 and 4-year-old, thank you, receiving special education services, pre-K.
Got it. So in the number that got to 20 million includes them in this, and then the number you're talking about did not include them. That's the difference.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the difference between the 7.6 here and the 9 million is, my understanding is that this does not include benefits, whereas the 9 million would include the benefits. And so that's the difference there.
For the educators.
Correct.
Because benefits are budgeted separately in the MCPS budget, and so the special education staffing numbers that I pulled came from the part that doesn't include benefits, because the benefits are added separately.
So the way the state requires us to do our budgeting, we put all of the benefits in chapter 12, category 12. But then we wanted to give a full picture of the costs of these programs. And so when we did our slides, we included the benefits in with those programs where they're charged to capture the full cost of the program.
Got it. Go ahead. Okay, so I'll come to you in a second. So presumably on this chart, so back to this chart, the benefits for the special educators are included in here somewhere? Or where would they be in this chart?
They're in continuing salaries and benefits.
Right? That would be part of that. Is that correct? It's a question.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my understanding.
Let me invite our budget director, Yvonne Alfonso Windsor, up to
Good call.
clarity.
For the $5 million gap or the entire $5 million?
Yeah, let me get to that.
Good morning.
You're
Yvonne
already
Alfonso.
on. You're on, yep.
So the 20 million includes the additional 9 million from 24 to 25 due to the enrollment, and the 9 million includes the benefits associated with the positions in the 9 million, as opposed to the 7.6 that is just based on the salaries and contractual services.
Right, so the 7.6 is salaries, the other 1.4 is benefits. Got
And
it.
then the difference between that and the 20 million is this year, as you know, our employees receive 3% GWA and steps. So the 20 million then now accounts for the increase in the salaries across the entire special education
Got it.
budget.
And then, so the difference between the 9 and the 14, right? The 14 is what was requested, which would include benefits, right?
Correct.
So the 14, so if you do the same ratio, some portion of that is benefits, some portion of that is just the salaries for the folks. And so
The 5 million included some FTEs plus the benefits associated.
what's the impact of that $5 million difference as far as people in special education classes?
I don't have it in front of me but it was about 200 positions. No, I'm sorry. The 5 million included about 76 positions plus the benefits.
Got it. So 76 less special educators incorporated in that $5 million.
Correct.
And that was the request from the special education office just to maintain level of service
Based on enrollment.
based
yes.
on enrollment. Got it. Okay. Well, no, the 14
million.
the 14 versus the 9. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I think I understand. Do you have a question still?
I don't think so.
Okay. And then, since you're up here, contractual services was mentioned.
Correct.
Every child has to have their IEP followed. If we don't, the vacancy rate here, 9.5, 54 vacancies out of 568 positions is what was in the packet. That's a large number of vacancies. The positions are filled with contractual services because you're required to, right?
Correct. So this year, we did the budget a little bit different too, as special education, when they were looking at their budget. They includes their current request, the 9 million, includes about 230 more FTEs. But they knew that they were not going to be able to fill all the positions. So instead of asking for more than those 200, some of that $9 million it's budgeted in contractual services for speech language and for interpreters, which are the positions that they're having a lot of difficulty filling.
And the pay is what's the difference in pay between the FT, the hired employee staff and the contract? Are we paying more to contract? I would assume.
So in the last meeting that we had with special education, some of those contractual services could be almost, 30 to 40% more than personnel. But the problem is that we're not able to find the personnel.
But the personnel are working at these places where they're getting 30, 40% more. It's not an uncommon problem. We see this in other spaces and with HHS and social workers and things. Okay, just want to understand that context. Yeah, Councilmember May.
I wondered if this would be a helpful moment to have our labor partners weigh in on that particular conundrum, or if you want to hold on to that till.
Yeah, I would like to thank you, first of all, for inviting us here today. It's really a new experience for me as a union leader to be asked to comment on the budget. When it comes to these contractual services, what we're told by our folks who are in the work is that the reason that contractual providers can bring in people is because they do the work oftentimes remotely. So the students are not getting in-person services, they're getting them over the computer. And of course, there is a real churn in the people who provide those services because they're not permanent employees. They come and they go. Oftentimes they're working with a contractor because they did not work out in a school system. So we have some real concerns about the reliance on contractual services. But we recognize that because of the work, the caseloads that our people have, and because of the lack of competitive wages, that we're finding it difficult to bring people in as MCPS employees.
Appreciate that. Okay, so I think we've talked about special ed, and so, right, Mr. Hall, last question I have, the different, yeah.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make a quick comment on that. If I-
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Just to put a fine point on what was just said, I think it's clear that, and I would suspect that MCPS, given their druthers and the funding appropriate for it, would agree that ultimately the solution here would be to be able to have enough funding to improve the salaries and benefits so that we can hire the people, and that is going to provide for much better services for our students. So as we, again, just as we continue to weigh what we want to fund and what is not, and that should be, that we need to keep that in the conversation.
Yeah, I know you would rather have people in the seats for cost, consistency, less churn. I think those are 3 C's, actually. Collaboration. There you go. So could you just speak to me, it doesn't seem, and this is, I know you say this in the memo, if the office requested $14 million to maintain services, why did we only include $9 million in increase? It seems like we have to maintain services. Was that a mistake?
It was not a mistake. It was one of a series of really difficult decisions that had to be made. I think, as you highlighted earlier, there's, including the ESSER, a lot of revenue that's not going to be there next year. Speaking on this specific decision around special education, I think it's clear based on what we're seeing and, what our students are experiencing that this is absolutely critical. And going without it is going to mean a reduction in services to those students. And so I would, ask the committee to, really give some consideration to restoring that funding because it is going to be critical to just maintaining the services, like you said, that our students are already receiving. And without that, there will be a reduction in services.
All right, thank you. Let's go back to, I know we switched there, but we've handled a portion of the later memo, so appreciate the clarity. All right, so we're back to the.
We talked a little bit about expenditures. I'm going to, next slide, pass it back to Mr. Hull, who's going to talk about revenue.
All right, so this is a chart here that shows the funding levels for MCPS going back to the turn of the century. Seems funny saying that when you grew up in the 80s and the 90s, but it goes back to 2001. And it shows the increases both in real dollars and then inflation adjusted dollars. And I think as everyone is probably more keenly aware of now than ever after the past several years of extremely high inflation, that it's the inflation-adjusted dollars that really matter, because obviously our salaries go up each year, has already been mentioned. The cost of our contractual services goes up every year. The utilities, the gas, the food, everything increases year to year. And so when we look at the bottom line on this, that really shows the school district's purchasing power. What are we able to purchase as far as people, services, technology, et cetera, for our students? So even though the top blue line has gone up fairly consistently over the past 20 plus years, we can see that the school district's purchasing power has remained flat. And that comes with a lot of additional services that we're trying to provide to our students. And so we literally are doing more with less or with the same. Back in 2001, as I'm sure many of you remember, people weren't talking about free meals for all. They weren't talking about these high levels of mental health and social emotional supports that our students need. The technology, the one-to-one devices and the hotspots that we provide for our students who can't afford internet in their home. These are all additional services that weren't part of education 20 years ago, but are absolutely critical to education today. And so trying to provide those additional services on, basically the same purchasing power, inflation-adjusted dollars, has caused the school system significant challenges, because as we're putting these new programs in, it's squeezing other programs out. And so just to kind of highlight, I know everybody feels like, and believe me, I'm a resident of Montgomery County too, taxes go up and it hurts households' bottom line. But the flip side of that is, the school district is maintaining basically the same purchasing power over the past 2 decades with much higher expectations and requests from our community.
Yeah, and I just to ask a question here, I've seen this chart before. One of the things that if you did because right now we're at a lower purchasing power than 2009, right, before then we obviously there was real dollars went down and, through the Great Recession, obviously. And then since then, since 2016, or since a little after recession, we started on an upward trend in real dollars. The other thing is the school system has changed. Who's there has changed. I just think of if you did just this chart, what was the demographic of the school system in 2001 as far as racial and ethnic makeup, English language learner, or whatever we were calling it, ESL probably at that time, the poverty rates, the farms rates, all of that, I don't have it in front of me. That might be a good idea for a chart to look at. I just think the whole need has changed. Not only has the purchasing power lessened, which is the point you're making, the needs have changed. In the letter, in the packet, and since 2020, I think it was, special education students, you can correct me if I'm wrong, have gone up 40%. That's in 4 years. Is that correct?
Over the course of this time, I think it was 40%.
Yeah. Oh, this time, from 2001, excuse me. 2001 to 24, 40%. So an increase in people identified, obviously the services needed, and you could do that almost in every category. I don't know what the farms or ever farms rate were in 2001. I know it's upwards of 40% now. English language learners. So I just think that needs to be understood too. And again, to your point, the community, we get what we pay for, and the community has to make these decisions, and they're difficult decisions, and it's a federal, state, and local issue, but largely we fund our school system, the vast majority here at the local level. So
60%.
Yeah, so I just think that's another thing that's not really caught in here is, yes, we can purchase less, but to your point, all the needs have gone up, the things you mentioned, because of who we're serving. And that's not unique to us, but in a county this big and as diverse as we are, it is a kind of unique thing. Yeah. Okay, please continue.
If we can go to the next slide.
So we've talked about chapters is how we develop our budget. We've talked about categories, where the fixed charges are in a category 12. But here we also talk about objects. So objects is another way that we divvy up our budget for state purposes. And this, we're all aware of this number. Our salaries and benefits normally represents about 90% of our operating budget. So when you look at the other categories, supplies and materials, that includes instruction materials, contractual services, we've talked about not only in special ed, but in maintenance as contractual services. And another object is holds our utilities and our non-public placements, 4.4% there. And then finally, furniture and equipment, a very small amount there, 0.9% of our budget. But, when we talk about adding, subtracting, everything revolves around our salaries and our people. We're a people business. So that's what this is illustrating. Next slide. And then now turning the conversation back to categories and this book. So we have 11 chapters within the book. Chapter 1 is schools. And as we can see, another ratio that we talk about is that 80% of our money goes directly to schools. And some of the other chapters have schools within them, school supports within them. But in general, we're always about 80% we are funding the schools. And the other 20 is district-provided services for those schools. And we're just going to do a little breakout of what that represents. Again, rather than going through every page of this budget book, we're showing you kind of summaries here. So next slide. So this gives you an idea of where that 2.53 out of the 3.53 billion goes, mainly for our high schools and support staff within their teachers. High schools, middle schools, and elementary schools is the bulk of it, as well as special education, which we've been talking about this morning. EML service, these are other services that occur in the schools that we break out just to kind of show exactly what's represented for our school spending. There's maintenance, there's food service, as well as our early childhood programs as listed here. Just a little visual to highlight, where the money goes. Next slide.
All right, and so what happens to that other 20%? Obviously, $631.5 million is a lot of money. So this is the district's provided services. So they're not built into the school's budget, but as Mr. Riley highlighted, they all go to serve students and to serve schools. And so the first and the largest, about $188 million, is our Department of Transportation. So we have one of the largest school bus fleets in the country. We transport over 100,000 students every day, travel over 100,000 miles every day. To put that in context, that is equivalent to driving around the Earth at the equator 4 times every single day. So it is a tremendous operation. The next one here is academic and other instructional supports. So these are the direct supports of the Office of Special Education, emergent multilingual students, math, science, et cetera. Then you've got school maintenance. Again, as one of the largest landlords in Montgomery County with over 211 schools and close to 250 facilities, we spend about $66 million a year on maintenance. Technology, the vast majority of this is at our schools and our media centers with our students, the Wi-Fi at all of our schools, the Chromebooks that our students take home and use. The next one is student and mental health supports, followed by utilities, which is something we really have no control over. Obviously, we're doing whatever we can to lower our energy uses, and we've got a couple of pay-for-performance contracts where they're working in our schools to install things like timer switches on the lights and other things that will save dollars in utilities. But as far as moving from one year to the next, you can't just say we're going to cut 10% of the utilities and start cutting the lights out at the end of the 5th period. So that is, out of our control, at least in the short term. The next one, the $26.9 million, that is a combination of several things: safety and security, communications, shared accountability. So a number of offices there, again, that provide direct services to kids, facilities management, and then when you get pretty far over to the right here, you're talking about some of the central office functions, such as human resources, finance, and then the very last one there is district leadership. So, we put this up because I know that there's kind of a belief that in a $3 billion budget, you can find $10 million or $40 million or $50 million, by looking for efficiencies. And, while we have gone to painstaking lengths to find $14 million in reductions, and a lot of that were things that, frankly concerned our board that we were proposing to remove, but, felt the obligation to do so based on the fiscal climate. But there really is very little flexibility, very little wiggle room or extra money in any of these departments. Our people work long hours and extremely hard to continue to meet the needs of our students. And so when we start talking about cuts, we certainly, the first place we will always look is central office, because we don't want to touch the classroom unless absolutely necessary. But when you're talking about a $56 million gap, we're not going to have a choice. So in addition to central office, some of the things that we've discussed with our board, and no final decisions have been made, and certainly no complete agreement, so I don't want to give the impression that these are things that the board has already approved, but things we've discussed with the board do include class size increases, the reduction in staff development teachers, potentially the slowdown in the expansion of pre-K. So, these are things that are on the table that we know would be very unpopular and would reduce the level of service that our students in our schools next year receive, and none of them that we are proposing or want to do, but places where we may find ourselves having to look, given the size of the gap.
Before you move off of this one, just the difference between maintenance and facilities management.
So maintenance is specifically repairs and fixing things like HVAC or whatever might be broken. Facilities management would be everything from custodial services to land maintenance, keeping up the grounds, our Department of Real Estate and Investment, and so there's.
And what was cut in this budget, this 631.5, which again is non-school based funding? How much of those 14 million inefficiencies came out of these categories?
All of it.
All of it. Just want to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, so I mentioned 92 for finance, so we're down, we're at 97, this is 24, now we're down to 92, just to say.
Right, so this is last year's budget. And I just want to notice, I visit a lot of schools as chair of the committee, and I know a lot of my colleagues do too. When you talk about maintenance and stuff, and there's not a school I go to where I don't see a maintenance issue or hear about a maintenance issue or both, and then hear about the delays in time for people, and I see our union partners, of getting there to fix these things, right? So we talked about safety and security last. I talked about I'm assuming the security staff are in that bucket, right? Their salaries. Is that correct?
This would be.
Or are they part of school-based money?
The security personnel who are in our schools, we've got, most middle schools have 2, high schools have between 6 and 8 on average. Those would be in the school budgets, but like the rovers for the elementary schools, our cluster security coordinators, our central, office of security would all be included in this.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. Continue.
All right, and then if we can just go to the next page, I'm not gonna, I know Mr. Riley already went through this, but I just wanted to kind of once again highlight the reason that they're not in descending financial order is we put them kind of in priority need order. And so again, much like special education that we just talked about, we have inflation across the board. And if we don't, that we have to pay for. And so that has to be budgeted, or there's going to be a reduction in services. Same thing with the next 2 enrollment changes and additional school supports. These things are happening, and so we need to budget for them. If we don't, then we're going to have to cut somewhere else. So that's about 20 million there, plus the salaries and benefits of 120 million puts us at about 140 million just for inflation and contracts. That's before we touch any of the supports on ESSER. And so anything below 140 million would mean going back into the base and making reductions to services. And then on top of that, if we're able to get there, certainly the next priority would be those critical supports that are on ESSER. But, the number of 140 is really the number where we need to be. Otherwise, we're going back and looking at some of these items that I mentioned earlier around class size, staff development teacher, and other things that are currently being provided to the students that we would not be able to provide next year.
Is that it? That's the last slide?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was helpful to go through and get the perspective. I think now we'll turn to our union leaders, hear from you, and then we'll have questions for everybody on all and then we'll turn to Ms. McGuire to run through the packet.
We don't need to. Okay. Well, if we have questions for Ms. Rivera, we will. Ms. Martin.
Well, thank you very much, Committee Chair Joando. Really appreciate the time to speak today. You've already spoken, and Mr. Hull and Mr. Riley have made it clear what the challenges are that we're facing in terms of the needs of our students. And we educators need your help meeting those challenges. We're seeing, unfortunately, an unprecedented exodus of staff in recent years. We have lost thousands of our teachers. They've left the classroom, and more are heading to the exits this year. We're having difficulty backfilling those positions, hiring more and more people who lack certification. Schools of education are not producing a new crop of teachers to come and fill in for those of us who retire or leave the system. So what's driving people out? Well, we looked at those graphs about the real dollars that we have to spend in education. What has happened is that the salaries that folks earn in education have not kept up with inflation. And we are still at a place, even though we had significant increase last year, where we're not where we were in the early 2000s in terms of wages in real dollars. As the Economic Policy Institute's recently reported, Maryland teachers experience a 20% pay penalty compared to employees working in similar professions. And given the job market right now, our folks have skills that other industries value and show respect that we don't always get here in the school system because of the working conditions we face. As I say, those are increasingly difficult. We have a lack of staffing that leads to greater workloads, really staggering workloads. And, you know, things like the culture wars that we're facing here in Montgomery County target us and disrespect us and make the job that much harder. Acts of hate and violence have been proliferating in our schools, as I'm sure you have been aware. We have long been understaffed and struggling to provide mental health, counseling, and special ed services. And that federal ESSER funding really did temporarily provide us with a way to beef up those supports. But as you're hearing, we've got to figure out what to do now because that money's going away. I've seen firsthand the impact of these staffing shortages. I'll tell you, we have an autism program in one of our local elementary schools. When I visited, they had not been able to hire anyone to fill those autism positions. They had to borrow from another school an experienced special education teacher. They had a long-term substitute who was brand new to teaching, and they had borrowed paraeducators from other schools. So there were shortages in the schools that they had drawn from to fill out this program. That's the kind of difficulty that we're facing. They were so short-staffed, no one was getting lunches or breaks. They're working straight through the day to make sure those kids stay safe. Similar situation at Rock Terrace, where they're understaffed and really are having significant safety issues. When I was there, I actually witnessed myself a behavior specialist being choked and pummeled by a dysregulated student who had eloped to the parking lot. That child persisted in attacking her even as 5 other staff members who were pulled from their normal duties worked to contain him. That behavior specialist had already been out 3 times due to injuries she had suffered this year. Staff shortages in special education also mean students aren't getting the services that are mandated for them, and that puts us in some legal peril. Caseloads of counselors and psychologists and other health professionals are far larger than professional standards recommend. We've got elementary schools that have over 800 kids in a school and only 1 counselor to support them. We're simply unable to provide the care that's needed. As a result, students are suffering and staff really feel demoralized and exhausted. Adding to our staffing problems, the poor pay for substitute teachers leads to hundreds of unfilled substitute requests on any given day. I can give you statistics that have been shared with us from MCPS. I didn't bring them here, but I can share them. The lack of substitute coverage hinders our ability to plan lessons, provide support to students, and contact families. And many times, those overburdened teachers are not being compensated for those extra duties. what ends up happening too is for those kids, especially in elementary school where we tend to split the classes up and drop them in another classroom, everything is upended. Lessons are upended as new kids are in a classroom. The children who receive those students are also losing out. Group work isn't possible. The lesson has to be totally reworked to make accommodation for that absent teacher and the lack of a substitute. So,
I learned this year, and I think
Yeah.
SPS learned that's sprinkling.
yes, it's called sprinkling. I think that's too nice a term. It's more like dumping, unfortunately. It's more like dumping. So finally, the year of turmoil at the top in MCPS leaves us looking for new executive leadership. We have to invest in improvements in the Office of Compliance and the Office of Labor Relations if we're going to restore confidence in MCPS as an employer. And we also need to make sure that full funding is there so that we can attract a new superintendent who's going to be good at the job and who's going to have the resources needed to be successful. So the Board of Education's request was decidedly conservative. We were really disappointed with that. And now the county executive has failed to honor even that request. So we're looking to you. Really, the council really needs to be the champion here for our schools, for our children. We urge you to supply MCPS with the full funding the board has required. It's going to allow us to tread water. We're not going to be able to answer a lot of the problems that we're facing, but without that funding, I don't know where we're going to be. But thank you again for having us here to speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Ms. Handy?
All right, good morning. I am Christine Handy, I serve as the president of MCAP, which is the union representing the administrators within our school district. And I'm coming today to just make an urgent plea to wholeheartedly endorse the complete funding of the Montgomery County Public Schools budget. I find myself, just in thinking about this, I'm like in disbelief that I'm advocating for $56 million that's currently under threat of being slashed from the district's budget. Like, that's such a staggering figure, when I think about it. I know when you all think about it as well. And so when I think about that, over 90% of the district budget, like 89%, right? 90% is allocated towards personnel. And if I think that we got to cut, that we might have to make some significant cuts, that could be like 50 million of the 56 million is personnel to, dedicated to the workforce. And I'm like, how will we do this? Will we be on the cusp of like a reduction in force? I mean, that's a lot of staff that would be jeopardized. That would be jeopardizing the backbone of the school system. Will essential staff positions remain unfilled and then lead to untenable class sizes? We have to make those kind of cuts. Can we ensure the implementation of our security measures that need to be put in place? Are we going to have to scale back on technology advancements? Are we going to lose staff development teachers as we have them now? With so many, we got new teachers coming in. We have people we're hiring more people now who might not be certified. I mean, and when I mentioned the potential loss of half of your half-time for your staff development teachers, the principals are just like, oh my gosh, how can they do that work and do the work that they have to do? So, we're gonna lose something. Are we going to witness an exodus of talent to neighboring districts that have more robust resources? And then, like Jennifer said, I'm like, how will we attract a superintendent, willing to take the helm of a district operating on such a shoestring budget? I mean, it's not a shoestring, it's a lot of money, but those kind of cuts, somebody's going to be looking at that and saying, oh, they're not even funding the district as it needs. So, and for me, this is tough because as a leader, in my 20 years as a high school principal, I don't operate on a deficit mindset. That's just not my thinking. So this is just really hard for me because I'm usually optimistic. I work on a mindset of hopefulness and anticipation for the future. So I'm grappling with this deficit, oriented perspective. And that's just really challenging for me. because, our leaders, they are really, their priority is the well-being and the educational enrichment of our students. And so I think it's imperative to recognize that the vitality of our school system extends beyond education. Like, it's the cornerstone, attracting residents, attracting businesses. Everybody always looks at the schools. I can't tell you, as the principal of Gaithersburg High School, how many times I met with real estate agents to talk to them about, because they wanted to sell houses in our area, but they wanted to know about the school. And I had to tell them all the great things that we were doing in the school, because that was so important to them. And so when I think about this, 6 of the top 10 Maryland high schools are in Montgomery County. 6 of the top 10 middle schools in Maryland are in Montgomery County. And 8 of the top 10 elementary schools are in Montgomery County. The Washington Post Principal of the Year, Montgomery County Public Schools, Tacoma Park Elementary School. Right here, like we have the best, and to sustain and elevate this standard, we're going to have the money. We cannot make these kind of cuts and still continue. And even we want to raise that, right? We want to raise that. And so we've already endured significant budget reductions during the preparatory phase. So before MCPS even, as you've heard, before they presented this budget, I'd already been hearing from the leaders of the cuts that they had to make. That $14.1 million of cuts that were made before they even brought the budget forward was a lot. It was significant, and we lost some things that, some people are wondering, like, how am I going to do without this? And so to be thinking that we might have to come back and make millions more of cuts, it's tough. And so I thank you all for just listening to us today and hearing from, from our perspective as the union. So thank you for having us at the table.
Thank you, Ms. Handy. Ms. Morrison.
I too want to thank the Education and Culture Committee for having the union leaders here today. It's very important to be a part of this process, and I hope that we continue to engage in this way. I feel like all of my colleagues here at the table have spoken very eloquently about what is going to happen if these cuts aren't indeed made up by the county council. And I want to speak directly to the impact on support staff professionals. Support staff professionals in MCPS, 73% of them live in this county. In order for them to live in this county, they have to work multiple jobs. They are the blackest, the brownest, the most diverse, the most immigrants. Most of them are 10-month support staff professionals that do not have an opportunity to work 40 hours a week, even though there is clearly 40 hours a week worth of work that could be done. You have paraeducators who are essentially the teacher of record. What that means for students is that students who really desperately need small group instruction are not getting it. And that means that those children are being left behind. It means that Black and brown children and support staff professionals who also, too, are consumers of MCPS, their children, their grandchildren, and most of them are proud MCPS graduates, are not able to provide the services to the community that they committed themselves to when they took on these positions. And I'm going to be really direct. I feel like every year we come here singing for our supper, for a community that says that it cares about students. And that is not a direct blast to the Education and Culture Committee. I'm having this conversation from my heart about the challenges that I know that workers are facing. I had a conversation with a security assistant by the name of Justin Merritt from Northwood High School. He was in a position of breaking up a 9-person fight at Northwood High School. His rotator cuff is torn. He's not sure when he's I think he's back at work now. I'm not even really sure if he's been fully cleared to go back to work. But there is a level of commitment that he has in wanting to be sure that staff and students are safe at Northwood High School. So I'm coming to you as a union president to let you know that the most diverse staff at MCPS who are in this work because they love it, who are working multiple jobs to continue to do this work, deserve better. The community deserves better, and our members and the workers of MCPS deserve better than what they're getting. And I'm asking you, I'm pleading with you to do what is necessary to make sure that they can continue to do that work with fidelity. And I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you to Ms. Morrison. Thank you, Ms. Handy. Thank you, Ms. Martin. Thank you for being here and providing that really important, on the ground on behalf of your members. I know we could stay here all day. You could tell stories and talk about things that are happening. I can promise you, as long as I'm chair of the committee, you'll be here, and I hope that's a trend that continues. And I know how much you and your members care about this county, care about the students, care about the families. And I know that not just as a consumer myself, right? I think, of MCPS education as a kid and as with my children. And I think my committee members would agree. And Councilmember Arnold will be right back. He's just using the restroom. If anyone needs to use the restroom, there's one outside, and you can go and come back. So I'm going to turn now to Ms. McGuire just to run through the remaining items in the packet. I think we handled special education pretty well. And we'll pause in each section, and then I'd ask you to stay, because if you have things to add, we'll ask questions. And I appreciate Vice President of the Board Harris for being here. And I know other members are watching online. They've told me many times they're part of the millions watching at home. But we're glad you're here in the person, and appreciate your participation as well as the rest of the MCPS staff. Ms. McGuire.
Thank you, and I can be brief, and we'll see what the kind of discussion the committee would like to have. A great deal of what's presented in the packet is informational and context-based, again, on areas that the committee had wanted to focus on. The first section of your packet, beginning on page 2, just resurfaces some of the information regarding the position changes. Again, MCPS does categorize positions in the operating budget according to the categories that you see here on page 2 of your packet. That is also known as Table 5 of the operating budget. And folks who know me know I like Table 5. So it's a very helpful way to understand sort of, again, the allocation of positions and, again, just sort of the movement of efforts and dynamics within the operations of the system. Certainly there is a smaller net increase of positions recommended in FY25 compared to the increase that was added in FY24. FY24 saw a net increase of 506.8 FTE, and the 25 request is for a net increase of 268.7 FTE. Many of the FY25 position increases do reflect those positions being shifted back from ESSER to the operating budget in FY25. And that is in, as we've talked about, a couple of different categories. One are, for example, social workers, which were initially added through ESSER and then are being requested to be restored by general funds, continued by general funds. And there are also, as we've talked about, areas of the budget that had previously been generally funded, moved to ESSER, and are now being requested to move back. Many of the position areas with the highest growth rate are in mental health and student support positions, and the committee has discussed coming back to look holistically at those efforts in collaboration with DHHS and perhaps the HHS committee to really look at that level of support and how it can be structured moving forward. Moving into vacancies at the bottom of page 3 of your packet is a table that summarizes the vacancies. This is presented by the state budget categories. So again, these are the budget categories that are required by the state. And what you see is that across the board, the system has almost 150 vacancies, reflecting nearly a 3.5% vacancy rate. You do see one area, student transportation, where there is an overhiring, and that's a strategy that is often in place given the level of turnover and need for substitutes in that area. Also, I would note that the strange numbers around Category 14 community services reflects the back and forth relationship with the community use of public facilities and the school system's relationship there to provide workers for after school and community use, and then a reimbursement. If you look at the page 4 of your packet, shows the vacancies in positions. Again, this is back to the Table 5 presentation of categories. And you'll see there are certainly a number of areas that we've talked about related to special education, having high rates of vacancies. In some areas, such as psychologists, there are a large number of vacancies and also a recommendation for an increase of positions. In other areas, such as facilities maintenance, there's a high rate of vacancies and an overall reduction of positions. So again, just showing different ways of approaching that vacancy rate. One more comment on that, the lapse assumption for FY25 is 3.5%. Beginning last year in FY24, that did see that increase in lapse, which is most likely, and I think generally associated with that change in approach to the fund balance. Prior to that, it had been 2%. I think part of what we're seeing here is that that's cutting very close, particularly in the large position categories of Category 3 and 6 for instructional salaries and special education, where most of the positions are. And certainly something that bears watching over time as MCPS adjusts to how to reflect those savings in the absence of the fund balance.
Appreciate that. Just let's pause here for a second. There's a lot in the vacancies section, so I'm going to ask a couple questions, and I'll turn to Councilmember Mink, and if Councilmember Alvarez has any questions. Overall vacancy rate of 3.5%, which in the system of 25,000 people is not bad at all, but there are some really high levels in some key areas, right? As we've mentioned, much higher than that. Special education being among them. There's a 13% vacancy rate for psychologists, with the request as part of the budget to add 19 FTEs. We talked about the difficulty in filling those, but could you just, do you have the appropriate folks here to talk about the challenge or opportunity there if we have a 13% vacancy rate, but we're requesting to add these FTEs? Turn your mic on, Mr. Holt, please.
So it doesn't look like we have anyone that can speak directly to that, but we certainly can follow up with any specifics. I will say one of the things that we did within the last year, either at the end of last school year or the beginning of this school year, is start bringing our psychologists in at a step 5 instead of a step 1. So that provided, a jump to the starting salary and reduce the vacancy rate significantly, although obviously we still are, reflecting about 15, 16 vacancies there as well. And so those are positions that we feel, are necessary and that we would be able to get filled.
Okay. Yeah, and you just follow up. I mean, that's what I assumed the answer was, but I want to know, because 13% is down actually from last year as far as vacancy rate. Okay. Facilities has a 15% vacancy rate. But it's recommended for a decrease of 6 FTEs. Could you help me square that and understand, we talked about, to mention this earlier, how there are great needs in the facilities, and some of them are people needs, and just many of them are people needs to get people out there to fix stuff. So talk about both the vacancy there, but also why the 6%, the 6 FTE decrease, and where are those coming from?
Yep. So most of these are school-based staff, and especially in maintenance and building services. And it has just been a long-standing, ongoing challenge for MCPS to recruit and fill those positions. They are, of course, unfortunately, some of the lower-paid positions where we tend to see higher turnover. And so we need all 50. We need more than that to really provide the level of service that we need. The reduction of 6, again, goes back to some of the things, kind of a theme that has been coming up through today's hearing is really difficult decisions. And so, we were given a target number to close in the budget, and it meant reducing positions. And so the decision was made that instead of, reducing somewhere where there weren't vacancies and the positions were actually filled, that, this, at least in the short term, would be less impactful to our student experience.
That's almost like a lapse take, kind of. It's not lapse, but if you have, how many vacancies? So you have 50 budgeted, you have 50 vacancies.
This reflects actual, not budget. So it's not budgeted for lab.
Right, so this is actual.
These are actual vacancies, and again, it's a snapshot, of course.
Yeah, sure, of course, right. It's not today, but
And the-
just so I'm reading it right, so there are 50, at this snapshot, there were 50 vacancies in that department,
That's correct.
which represented 15%.
That's correct. And again, this is also, if you look back at the table on page 2, which shows a little more of a historical context going back to prior to the pandemic in FY18, this is also the category, the only category that shows an overall position decrease from that time, over that time period. And I think certainly, as Mr. Hall mentioned, the system often is looking to make difficult decisions in operations that do support the instructional side of the house. But as you said, this is also one that we hear a lot about.
May I just add that I know for a fact that in maintenance, that is one area that has a very difficult time attracting
Your
tradesmen.
members.
Yes, they are. And quite a few of them are eligible for retirement at any time. So the vacancies that they already have could be exacerbated at any time by someone deciding that they're ready to retire. And we're talking about people who are plumbers, electricians, and, these are highly specialized skills that are very well paid and sought out in the private sector.
What do we pay, what's the starting pay for a maintenance person at a school?
We can follow up with that. I don't have that off the top of my head.
I'm just curious. We did that last week with the security professionals, which I think it was news to.
We can get you that
I've
information.
heard from so many people that they didn't know it was $36,000 for a security professional, including members of this committee. And I imagine that for someone who's a plumber, a high-skilled tradesperson, it's probably below market for them.
Absolutely.
And
There were leaders that were cut too. That's one.
yeah, and leaders, yeah. And I just want to emphasize, I've visited hundreds of schools over the last 6 years, right? This is like the top for community members, for parents, like just a gaping hole, or like this is something that you hear about at every trash cans in the hallways. You hear about it, and so there's multiple problems. We're not paying them enough. It's an area you have to force it to make a cut in because it's you're not trying to impact student learning, but this does impact student learning. The building you walk into, even the students themselves, they often get like the real cool students and involved students to take me around. And these are the things they focus on, like about how they feel about their school. And so I think it's an example of, and it's an area where you're saying, well, we have vacancies, might not be able to hire them, so we're going to cut it here, even though we need more than is even allocated. It just demonstrates multiple problems. Councilmember May.
Yeah, just on that note, also noting that when we don't have enough staff to get to some of these issues in time, then we also end up making poorer use of the space within the schools, which is obviously very expensive to build out. But we end up with, now we've got bathrooms or bathroom stalls that aren't being used. Sometimes we have classrooms or parts of classrooms that aren't being used, or it's like, don't go in this particular area of the school until we're able to get to it. And so to Chair Jawando's point, like this has implications that are go far beyond just we would like this area to look nicer. This is impacting our use of the school buildings and the experience of the students within the schools. And it's concerning when we look at some of these categories and we see these high numbers and high percentages of vacancies, and you have to assume that That's a combination of that we're not paying well enough, and also the workload that results from not having enough staff in all of these positions. So it's like, a vicious cycle, because we're decreasing those positions instead of raising the pay to be able to attract more people. We're decreasing the number of positions because we're not able to fill them, because we're not paying enough, which is going to, again, further increase the burden on folks and push them to retire, to switch into other areas. And so, it's just a dangerous trend that we have to stop. It's not going to get better unless we're able to address the foundational issues, which is the pay. And so I appreciate, bringing up the point, where was the category where you're the psychologist, right? Where we're now bringing them in at a higher step. Obviously funding budget is clearly an issue here. But, we're addressing that psychologist shortfall, and we can see that it's still a problem, but a decrease in vacancies because we're addressing the foundational issue, which is the salaries and benefits. And it's expensive to do that, but if we don't do that, this cycle is going to continue and get worse. And I'm looking at special education, obviously, which, again, this is a critical issue. If we don't address the foundational issue of pay, then we're going to continue to see this crisis worsen. And I see your finger on the button there.
I would like to ask Sally Murick, she's the paraeducator coordinator for MCPS, just to come up to talk a little bit more about what's going on with our paraeducators. Sally, yeah. Yep.
And if I may, while Sally's coming up, I wanted to speak to special education because I think that it may not be clear to folks who are tuning in that when we don't have the special education staff that's needed, it's not only special education students who suffer, but the general education students as well. In an elementary school, what I hear repeatedly as I go around the system is that because we don't have the staffing, kids are not getting evaluated for accommodation appropriately early enough, and leaving the general educator unsupported in a classroom where there are children with real needs. What ends up happening, I've heard about this in multiple places around the system, is teachers are forced to evacuate the classroom with their students as a dysregulated student acts out and damages equipment and is at risk for their own safety and the safety of others. But because we don't have the special education supports in the school, because there's not the ability to effectively get them that accommodation quickly enough, everybody is suffering. Learning stops for everybody. So these issues have real costs to our students because of our lack of will in paying people appropriately for the hard work this is.
I appreciate that. And before I turn to Ms. Murick, welcome, thank you. I appreciate Councilmember Mink bringing up the reason I asked about psychologists in maintenance in that order, because they're kind of it's the tale of two cities there, in that we recognize the problem, low pay for psychologists. Obviously, it's hard to staff positions, both, for different reasons. We started to see improvement. The vacancy rate has gone down for psychologists. Maintenance, we have not only elderly folks or more senior members that are on those jobs, more eligible for retirement, but the pay is presumably low. We'll find out what that is exactly. So I really appreciate you just drawing that out a little more clearly. Do you want to go before Ms. Murick goes, or do you want to let her go first?
I know.
So you can provide your context, and then I'll go to Councilmember Alvarez. Yes, you are on.
Good morning, council members. Thank you. I'm Sally Murick. I'm the paraeducator program manager and one of the vice presidents for the paras for the SEIU Local 500. I want to continue on the vein of what you're saying. It's the salary. If we don't have enough money, we're not going to get these people. We need people. As you've all stated, our students are presenting with greater challenges, not just in academic achievement, but their social, emotional, and economic needs. And one of the best supports we can offer our students is consistency. The same adults that are going to be there, they can begin to trust and build relationships. And we have a consistency problem. We have a recruitment and retention problem in MCPS. I'm speaking about higher salaries for these people, because we can't attain them. We can't recruit them. When we used to have, when we used to have around 4,000 paras, I knew our numbers were 60% had a 4-year degree, another 10% had a master's, and we had about about 9 or 10 that had a PhD. I cannot say that now. Now we're, as I say, they're just looking to try to get anybody that'll come in for this non-competitive pay. And it's creating an issue across the school system. So we need to address this, and reducing our budget is not going to help. We need to offer competitive salaries to get the right people in the job that can support our students, that can support our teachers, that can be there for instruction as well as for social emotional support. So I ask you to please find the money so that we can make MCPS what MCPS should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Muirk. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I won't cry this time, but I often, you get me a lot. P almost got me when I think about how important all of our educators are important, but the paras are so close to the kids on a daily basis when they need that extra support. And it's for my children, it's been a huge impact. And I just think in my view, you couldn't pay educators in general enough, but but the low pay that we're bringing in a lot of our paras is just it's insane to me. And I know it's a function. It's not what MCPS. It's not, and none of this is like MCPS is wanting to do this. It's just where we are with the affordability level. So, Mr. Hall, I want to let you say, and I'll turn to Councilmember Albanese.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the perspective that Ms. Muirk brings to this conversation. It's really important. We are doing a para study right now to look at the salaries and if there needs to be differentiation. We have paras that do a lot of different work across the system, from pre-K to special ed and things in between. And so we are looking at that, but again, that requires money. As far as the psychologists go, last school year we had 34 vacancies. This was just brought up to me. This year is in the packet is down to 15. So we've cut that number more than in half with the simple action of bringing people in at step 5. So it doesn't even always cost a lot of money, but these things do cost money, and they can be very effective if we have the resources we need.
Appreciate you. And then so I was texted, and you can confirm this in writing, but that from building service staff, their pay starts at $18.11 hourly, and then plumbers are $27.36. Oh, I know that I know that.
You got a plumber come to your house, you know that.
And I can just tell you that a starting salary, Mr. Hull is correct, we are going through a reclassification study, but at the current time, they start at grade 12, step 1, which is $21.33.
For a paraeducator, $21.
With a 4-year degree,
With the
which
4-year.
is what we're hoping they have, but they have not been having.
Got it. Thank you. Councilmember Alvarez.
Is this working? Because the light's not on.
Yeah, you're on.
It is on. All right, great. We got to fix that. So, all right, first of all, thank you all so much for coming. And I just want to start from this place. I always try to, is expressing my deepest appreciation and respect to all of you. We've got some incredibly dedicated people who are working day and night on behalf of our kids. And as a parent, as a resident and constituent of this great county, I just want to continue to express my appreciation. So just a couple of observations, and I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't already know, but we're experiencing staffing shortages in every single one of these categories and everything in every single department and agency across Montgomery County. Our building service workers within the Department of General Services, it's almost the exact same story. We have so many people who are eligible for retirement. We are not backfilling these positions at a rate that is high enough. It's actually a problem in the private sector as well. And so it's a systemic issue. Social workers, psychologists, also same thing. Health and Human Services is got similar rates of vacancies and have been aggressively partnering with HBCUs, with Montgomery College, just as MCPS has as well. And so outside of the budget process, which is always intense and condensed and overwhelming, we do need to revisit these systemic issues for these types of positions that are so critical to see what more we can do collectively as a government, not just MCPS, not just the executive branch, to raise all boats. Because we need a long-term 3, 4, 5, 10-year solution where we're investing in MCPS and ensuring that we are preparing the next generation of frontline workers who are choosing public service as a profession, and ensuring we continue to have a deeper bench, because this is going to continue to be a chronic problem. So that's separate. I do want to ask my colleagues in MCPS, so I mentioned some of the strategies that Health and Human Services and others are utilizing, and we don't have to answer that right now, but in the next few days as we deliberate, I'd just be curious as to how are you recruiting? Should we be looking at that budget as well? Because, you know, it's connected clearly. And within our Government and Operations Committee, they're right now considering some further investments in our Office of Human Resources to ensure that we're strengthening that work as well, because, as I said, the two are obviously inextricably linked. Couple of other observations. It's very clear to me that we need to make a further investment above and beyond what the county executive has recommended. I think, Ms. Martin, you mentioned tread water. That's probably pretty appropriate. But let's be honest, even the additional full investment of $50+ million, and we're going to do what we can from this committee, it's not going to solve all these problems. And it goes beyond money. And there are systemic issues, some challenges ongoing, a significant state of transition in MCPS leadership right now. And I'll just say what I'm feeling, and I'm sure others are feeling the same way, but this is one of the most significant superintendent appointments in my professional lifetime. I mean, given the circumstances and where we are, a lot is riding on this appointment. Got some incredibly talented people who are working really hard. But you all, I know, are hungry for and want some of that clear direction on where we're going from here. So that's why it's also difficult in this budget process to, you know, have these conversations with that question mark out there. It is what it is. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. But I just want us to reflect on that, and wherever we end up at the end of the budget process, come back more cohesively and more strategically and more holistically with all of our stakeholders and partners so that we can address the needs of the entire child. And Ms. Martin, you and I had this conversation just a couple of days ago, and I think there's a real opportunity for us to do that because all of these investments are obviously very important. I do have questions, not necessarily for right now. Again, you got a couple of days. We have a couple more sessions. But I would love to know procedurally the process you all followed to arrive at the recommended reductions. So, you know, the way we used to do it a long time ago was CAO would give all of the department heads 5% reduction mark. Departments would go back. We would give those reductions, and then they would be sorted through by somebody on the second floor of the executive office building. Questions would be asked. There'd be some back and forth, but there was an opportunity for input in that process by the various departments and agencies, and every department handled it a little bit differently. We actively sought the input of our frontline staff, and we're a much smaller operation than the Department of Recreation, but we wanted to ensure that there was complete and total understanding, buy-in, discussion, conversation, strategy around making these tough decisions, not top-down, but bottom-up, or just everybody on the same playing field. So would love to hear more details about just the process that you all followed strategically and whether there's consistency in that process. Does it change year over year? I know every year is a little different. I just would be curious as to how that works.
Councilman Alvarez, I would love to hear the answer to that question.
Sure. Yeah, if we can get it out, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So I'll start, and then I'll let Mr. Riley talk about the process that we went through this year, which mirrored the process that we went through last year. But, you know, I do appreciate you kind of bringing up the elephant in the room and the transitions that we have experienced at MCPS. And we do look forward to welcoming in, you know, a new superintendent. But I would also say that there's a number of people in very important leadership roles within the school system, many of them who are here today and others who, are off doing their jobs somewhere else, who have been able to provide that institutional knowledge, that consistency, and that leadership, even through these really difficult and challenging times. And so, it's not a rudderless ship. Certainly the person at the top of any organization is critical to providing that long-term strategic vision. But I just want to emphasize that the day-to-day operations, despite the many, many challenges that have been discussed here today, continue under the leadership of very experienced, talented individuals. And I'll let Mr. Riley talk a little bit more about the cuts.
Yeah, so a little bit about that process, as we talked about in the beginning, where we're looking for the departments, chiefs and associates. What are these accelerators that you need to move the needle, and what are reductions? So we're asking them kind of two sides of the spectrum. But what happens then is, there was a lot of accelerators submitted. So internally, we do kind of keep them. But then the discussion immediately kind of goes to the public. I don't know if you saw our budget work sessions. That's, once the superintendent's budget's done, people have the opportunity to say, hey, why couldn't we add funding or add positions here? And we might look back and say, yeah, that was one of the accelerators that didn't move through. If the question is, can we make all accelerator requests public? I guess we'll have to consider that. Right now, that is in our process. It would be a lot of requests. So I know I'm kind of hedging that answer, but right now we track the amount of accelerators asked, and we look at that and we save them from year to year and see if things change. But we really just make public what's in the superintendent's budget, and that's what we go forward and get community input. Though, I say that, but the superintendent's budget advisory committee will look at things that we're thinking about for the superintendent's budget. And that's where these issues or these questions might come up. Can we do something else? Can we add more? Or is it something that we should be reducing? As I mentioned in the beginning, our budget forums, that's where we got at the conversation as well, too. What are we doing well? What can we add? And then what would we subtract to make room for those additions? So we're not at that point yet where we're making public every ask from all of the different chiefs, but we do track them.
I appreciate that. I get that on a high level. I guess I'd love, and again, you don't have to provide this right now, but a little bit more specificity. Specifically, the way that we did it when we had to make terrible reductions during the recession 12 years ago was we created a rating system. So those programs or services that serve the highest needs populations in geographic areas that were not serviced by other programs and services that met the priorities of the county executive at the time received higher scores. It was based on need, right? And then from there, we had other categories and we numbered them in different ways. And so I don't know what tool you use internally or if you use one specifically, but somehow the decisions from what you described to what was brought to us before were made, and I'd just be interested in that process.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I didn't share that, but we do have an accelerator form where we are looking at priorities, we're rating it. So the form itself is in our operating budget guide that we issue every year. So even just making that transparent so that, it's in here somewhere, I don't know what page. But so what are we looking at to determine the criteria for accelerators? By the same token, we're doing the same thing with reductions too. We just went through that freeze. So for the freeze, when we're taking things away, what are some critical services that aren't going to be available, and then we make exceptions to that. But it's along the same lines, what we want to add and what we want to take away. We have to make sure we socialize that and look at data. We want to be data-driven. But the form does address that.
Got it. And if I can too, just specifically on your question about the reductions. So each of the last two budget cycles, at least since I've been here, we've started as part of the process with a 3% reduction off the top, and that's just to challenge departments and push them to make sure that we're picking up all the crumbs, that, we're reprioritizing if necessary, because things do change from year to year. And so that's how we started both budget years. Last year, we came back with around and And we do it at the chief level, so it's not every single department. We give some latitude to the chiefs to work with their folks to say, like, for me, for example, I knew I wasn't touching safety or transportation with the issues that we've had in those areas. So then I looked for additional cuts in other areas of operations. And so then last year we came back after the council's budget allocation and made about another 5% cut, again, in a similar way, prioritizing the departments that, you know, are completely off the board to begin with. This year, we did that second round of reductions before the superintendent's recommended budget went out. So both years, there was 2 rounds, starting with a 3%, coming back to a 5%. Last year, it was at the beginning, and then after the council's allocation. This year, it was at the beginning and after the superintendent's allocation.
Yeah, that's more what I was looking for. I appreciate that. I have a couple of follow-up questions on that, but I can do that offline. Thank you.
Appreciate that line of questioning, Councilmember Albanaz. It was kind of, we were tiptoeing around it earlier with the special education process, you know, in that there's always going to be, you know, we need this, but we need to, you have the higher level view of what needs to be cut. But I think embedded in that question from Councilmember Albanaz also was getting the involvement of the folks who are on the ground, not just the chief level, but the folks who are delivering whatever service, you know, like in case of transportation, I know you didn't cut them, but the bus driver or the, you know, the maintenance worker or the paraeducator, you know, just developing a process to do that. I think that's really important. Again, you got to make the decisions you have to make, but having that input, I think, is critical.
Can I just quickly say?
Please.
So as part of the superintendent's budget advisory committee that Mr. Riley mentioned, we do have all of the unions involved in that. And then, of course, you know, we're meeting, you know, every other week, if not weekly, throughout this process to discuss and get input from them as far as what are critical positions. And so, although, you know, I don't know that we've specifically reached out to our bus drivers in this process, we do hear their voices through their union representation. And then, of course, encourage our folks to reach down as far as they can to the people actually doing the work.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's you that does, but I just think there just needs to be a process. You're such a big organization, and the you know, the disconnect between someone who's delivering the service and then the budget, there's a lot of opportunity for that to be, you know, changed or different or not translated well. And no malintent from anybody, but I just think whether it's the chiefs, I would just think about going forward, the superintendent's budgetary advisory. I've been to that. That's a, you know, a high level group, and it's great, but it's not going to get the kind of focus group level, particularly for cuts, right? Like, you know, when you're making really difficult decisions in key areas, hearing from those folks, I think will help, you know. And again, you might still have to make you're going to have to make still tough decisions, but I just think having that input would be helpful.
Yeah,
Yes.
Councilmember Joando, I have to say that this is not something where that level of specificity was something that we were engaged in, and nor did we have much appetite for talking about cuts when what we're dealing with is a lack of resources to do the work effectively. So no, we learned about the cuts after they were proposed.
Even at that high level, we have some work to do, which is always, you know, always a challenge, but just glad we talked about it. We just heard from our great paraeducators, so we're going to take care of, just pause here and move to the special appropriation that will support state money for paraeducators. So let's just get that out of the way, and then we can go. I think we have one more packet item, and then we'll be done absent questions. Ms. McGuire.
Yes, thank you. So jumping to the end of your packet on page 13, there is an FY24 supplemental request for the council to appropriate state aid. And this would be nearly $5 million to the FY24 operating budget for the Educational Support Professionals Bonus Grant. This is a funding program that the state initiated last year, the last spring. And the council received the funds last year at around the same time. So we do have this on a little bit of a fast track to be sure that we can get it to MCPS in time to implement this for their final payroll issuance of the fiscal year. And so this is technically on the council's agenda for introduction tomorrow, and then turn around for public hearing and action the following week. This would, again, it's a state grant, and through the criteria that MSDE has put forward, MCPS, of course, work with the state to identify a total of 10,249 employees who qualify for this bonus. And again, MCPS does absorb the amount of that that's related to some of the federal taxes.
All right, any questions from colleagues? So we'll let the council know that when it's introduced tomorrow that we support it, and so it can get into the pockets of our support professionals as soon as possible. So, yeah, so without objection, that's approved. All right, Ms. Squire, I think we have just one item remaining here.
Sure, thank you, and we'll move backwards one page at a time.
Sorry, I know we've been
No,
hopping
that's
around,
fine.
but it's good, though.
That's fine. So I'm on page 12, pardon me, of the packet, just to touch briefly on the employee benefit plan, the EBP fund. And again, this is an issue that the committee has taken up in a number of different contexts, and certainly it's an issue that MCPS has been raising concerns about related to expenditures and revenues in the EBP employee benefit fund. MCPS, like the other county agencies, is largely self-insured. So this fund pays the cost of health care claims from MC employees, retirees, and other covered members. The fund receives revenue in the form of the funds contributed from MCPS through the Category 12 appropriation that sort of represents the employer contribution to the fund. And then, of course, the fund also takes in the revenues from the employees in the form of paycheck deductions and other contributions. The county has a long-standing policy guidance for all county agencies to maintain a 5% fund balance in their group insurance fund. Of course, certainly, these are funds that fluctuate based on revenues and expenditures. It's something that the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee discusses every spring as part of the budget process across all agencies, partly to understand the degree to which all agencies are experiencing similar or different expenditure trends. And the committee did hear earlier this spring that certainly other agencies as well, including county government, are experiencing some of the spikes in expenditures and costs that are being experienced now. And so MCPS, the table on the middle of page 12 of your packet, does show that from the from between FY24 and then through each of the budget submissions, MCPS has recommended to increase the amount of their FY25 contribution to the fund. And again, that represents the employer's contribution. And that's an important marker certainly here. The board's budget then would add a total of $43 million for employee benefits in FY25. My understanding from MCPS is that, again, that represents the amount that will be needed to meet ongoing costs. So again, that is an important element to add to the fund. In addition, the committee has discussed the FY24 actions that MCPS is engaged in. One, the council has approved the $5 million transfer from the MCPS fund balance that the MCPS requested, and MCPS also is engaged in savings in the current year in an effort to have additional funds available to shore up the fund in FY24 as well. Council staff would just note that certainly one of the key balancing points with any internal self-insurance fund is the structure for sustainability over time. And that's always a moving target, if you will, because again, it represents a fluctuation of costs and revenues and also expenditures. However, it is going to require a long-term conversation and long-term structural adjustments to ensure the long-term health of the fund. So council staff recommends that in addition to the actions that have been outlined here, that the committee come back perhaps in conjunction with the GO committee to talk about those structural aspects that are needed and ensure that there's a multi-year strategy in place.
Thank you, Ms. McGuire. Ms. Riley, do you have anything to add to, obviously this is an ongoing, this is a challenge and it's not heading it's not looking like absent some changes, it's going to improve. Do you have any color to add?
Just as Ms. McGuire mentioned, it is going to be a multi-year plan because one of the things that we want to make sure that we do have a good benefit plan. We talked about salaries, but another thing that attracts, recruits, and to help us recruit and retain is a good benefit plan too. So this is part of, what we want to make sure is that we still have a great plan that people attracted that want to come to MCPS. So that's one of the things we're looking at, but also long-term solutions. What are some things in that plan that can make it more sustainable, as Ms. McGuire mentioned? Because we don't want to be coming in this situation every year. We know we're going to need increased investments over the next 2 to 3 years, but from there, we want to get to that point where we're 5% as a fund balance and then maintain that.
Absolutely, and I think both points well taken. We want to make sure the benefits are competitive and strong for our employees, but that it's also sustainable for the long term. So, and obviously we're going to be working together to help figure this out in addition to the other things that we need to figure out in the operating budget here. Any questions on this from colleagues? No? We did have in the packet, I'll just note, the statistical profiles and other background information, which was really helpful. And I know, Ms. Handy, I think I heard you mention, I'll just lift this up because I saw it as well, that principals are the highest eligible to retire in the next 10 years, 64%, as well as other administrators at 51%, and then teachers are at 30%, support professionals are at 46%, and paraeducators, as was mentioned, have the highest turnover rate at just under 20%, and how just those lift up some challenges. So a lot of good information in there that I think underscores the discussion we've been having today. Really want to thank our union partners for being here. I want to thank MCPS, both Mr. Hall, Mr. Riley, and all the folks that are texting you the answers behind you. Yes, and then I'll just go to Councilmember Mick before we close out. Go ahead.
Thank you. Really appreciate the conversation that we had here today. I think that this was really critical, and just wanted to note also that obviously as Councilmember Albornoz was raising, like there's larger systemic issues that we need to come back to. There's also categories, as noted, where we need to make sure that we stop the bleeding or this cycle is going to continue in ways that really aren't sustainable even over the next year or two. So obviously we'll continue to look at those. But on the vacancies list that Ms. McGuire highlighted on page 4, we don't have the substitutes there. So I just wanted to note that one for the record also as one that we should come back to, that we hear a lot about from our parents and our family members, and that has a tremendous impact on the experience of our FTEs in the schools as well. So as we look at categories where really we need to find a way to address that fundamental salary issue in the way that you've been looking at the psychologist budget line and others, I want to make sure that we're including pay for substitutes in that category as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And actually, we have one more session. I was just going to talk about what we're going to do next time. I know when we talked about the vacancies, there were, at a point in time, there were 847 vacancies as of 4/18, about a week ago. And you talked about the overhiring and transportation, but we also need to just have a better sense. If you could provide, even just in writing for us, a snapshot of the substitute issue, as we come next time. I think we'll have time to talk about that briefly, to your point of just kind of where things are. And it was mentioned by our union partners, but I think it would be good to just get in a packet, like just where that is and what's happening there, because it obviously has a huge impact on day to day.
And if I can just suggest, there are two ways to look at this. One is, how is the pool complete? Do we have enough people who've signed up to be substitutes? But then on any given day, are people taking those positions, the open positions? So that's where we see the fill rate on a daily basis is a real problem.
Yeah. So is that we can work on that for next time? Okay. I know it's a short turnaround, but I'm assuming there's a lot of smart people that probably have been looking at this in your building. Yeah, Ms. Muir.
One clarification. I was trying to, Ms. McGuire, you were sharing about a bonus for, was that from the state?
Yes, that's from the
Yeah.
state.
And that's where in the first, they gave the first 500 last year, The next 500 will come this year, which accounts for about $473 after taxes.
Yeah, and that's what we just, I know that's what we just
I just
took
wanted to
action
clarify that. I thought somebody said it was from the county, but it was from
on.
the
No,
state.
no, no. We have to approve state money, you know.
Pass through.
Montgomery County does send the most money to the state, though.
Yes.
So I remind our state partners that a lot. It goes there and then it comes back here.
Right,
So,
so it was a pass-through. Thank you for allowing
no
it to
problem.
pass through.
no
Because
problem.
I just wanted to comment that when we're talking about substitutes, we're not just talking about teachers, we're talking about paraeducator subs too. So that's a big, that's a biggie as well.
Absolutely. That's what I mean.
It would be great, I think, if, when we come back next time, if we can, we're not going to be able to solve all these systemic issues, just like budget-wise, we are not going to be able to do all of that immediately. But I think that it would be helpful if we could get an idea of cost from MCPS on some of these budget lines to do some of what you did with the psychologist piece, if you were to be able to address that systemic issue by increasing the salary or hiring bonuses for special, and I leave you to have some of those conversations also with our labor partners to talk about what would even be effective and worth doing. But just to get a sense of what would the cost in some of these key areas be if we were to try to stop the bleeding here and start addressing some of the fundamental issues, and then we can at least have the conversation here on the council side, including for substitutes for all positions as raised.
Great. And so on May 1st, which is Wednesday, we are going to be talking about the blueprint, community schools, Title I, food services, CEP, and then any other updates. A couple of which we just added a new in follow-up, so we just added something there. And then we'll make our funding recommendations to the full council at that time. And then on May 9th, I believe, is
So that is, we're working through the schedule. That's
We don't know yet.
That's a board day, and we're working through the schedule.
Oh, yeah, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. So sometime in the second week of May, or we're going to we'll have the full council that will take up. It won't be that day because we can't do it on a day that the board meets for sure. So we'll work on that. But thank you again. Really just appreciate all the information from everybody. And with that, we are adjourned.